When considering today's central question, it can be all too common to view our forefathers as men representing the purest ideals of government. However, in my research, I came across an interesting realization. The forefathers themselves struggled to live up to their own ideals. While they attempted to create a government based on the central tenets of freedom, democracy, and truth, rather ironically, they would occasionally behave in ways that betrayed these very values. These included acts from racial fear-mongering of minorities to redrawing the Boston Massacre to exaggerate the animosity of the British. If the forefathers themselves struggle to uphold their own ideals, it means the American people must work incredibly hard to preserve the way of life that was created for us. Put simply, is America today our forefathers' vision? Yes. However, while standing the test of time, this vision is under threat, and we must work hard in order to preserve this vision. In order to analyze this central thesis, we'll take a look at three distinct values, established by our forefathers, and outline the threats against them: the idea of freedom, democracy, and the fundamental balance of power. First, let us discuss the foundational idea of freedom. The frequently cited First Amendment establishes the freedom of speech, assembly, religion, and the petition of government. The founders hoped to give average citizens the ability to speak out against injustice and unfair persecution. However, regarding the free dissemination of speech, more and more threats have emerged in recent years. One particularly salient example is book banning in the realm of public education, which has been occurring at an alarming rate. The American Library Association reports that the number of titles targeted for censorship has increased by 97% over the previous years and is still rising. While books may contain content and messaging that makes some uncomfortable, it is important to safeguard the existence and accessibility of these critically important sources of information. However, freedom of speech is not the only area under threat, as the very idea of democracy has been under threat for some time now. Utilizing the ideas of philosophers including Rousseau and John Locke, they envisioned a government for the people and by the people, to ensure they never had to endure tyranny again. The Braden Center for Justice explains that voting disenfranchisement through gerrymandering and other tactics such as stricter and more discriminatory voter ID laws has prevented many from being able to make their votes count. Moreover, Skye Perryman, the CEO of the nonprofit Democracy Forward, explains that plans from politicians detailed in the increasingly infamous Project 2025 have included anti-freedom agendas preventing the enforcement of acts such as the Voting Rights Act and National Voter Registration Act. It is clear that while the perception of a strong democracy is being upheld, many threats are gnawing at its roots. Now, the final area of analysis is the separation of powers. Our founding fathers, when creating the three branches, always envisioned a just and equal divide between the three, seeking to avoid the pitfalls of monarchy. However, many recent developments have now put this fundamental value on the brink. Upon the Supreme Court granting the executive branch full presidential immunity on July 1st, 2024, Justice Sonia Sotomayor remarked that only a king is above the law. It is also evident that our courts are attempting to gain more power through rulings such as Chevron, which reinstates judicial freedom in interpreting vague laws without having to consider recommendations or consequences from federal agencies. Moreover, proponents from Project 2025 have advocated for completely stripping the Department of Justice of any power, as well as overturning hundreds of Supreme Court rulings that have been integral to providing rights for millions. These represent just a small amount of threats that we will face in the future, when attempting to uphold the principles of separation and accountability. While our government may not be perfect, freedom, democracy, and the separation of powers are ideas that we should strive for in order to achieve our founding fathers' vision. Even though they themselves may have not been perfect when building our country, they succeeded in creating something bigger than themselves. This made the United States one of the most just and fair places to live. Although we may never be able to achieve a perfect ideal of freedom and democracy because of the fundamental nature of human greed and power, they are ideas to live up to. And that is what our founding fathers envisioned as a successful and fair country, by the people and for the people. Thank you.